Thank you all for coming out tonight. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be here with you. Tonight, I'm going to talk about electrification, what that means in terms of all sorts of clean energy tax credits and conversions that you can do with your home. Talk a little bit about the energy system as a whole, things we have to change about it, go kind of through in detail about what's available to you, and then also a little bit about my journey into this space of doing climate advocacy work as well, and some things that we need to do to make this clean energy transition happen. So be covering a lot of ground tonight. I'm happy to take questions. I will mostly try to push them to the end and be happy to do a lot of that towards the end of tonight. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to show you one of my favorite commercials of all time. It's from about 10 years ago, and we'll sort of talk and reflect about it afterwards. This is when the first mass market electric vehicle was launched, the Nissan Leaf. They put out this pretty amazing commercial, and so I'm just going to play it for you. And we tested the sound, so it should work on virtual too.
What if everything ran on gas? Then again, what if everything didn't? The 100% electric, zero gas Nissan Leaf. Innovation for the planet, innovation for all.
So just sort of a quick reflections. First off, I hope you enjoyed. It's pretty amusing. Things that you saw or noticed that maybe didn't think about before until that commercial. Does anyone want to throw something out? Don't be shy. Favorite moments?
Never thought of a chainsaw as a food grinder.
Yes. It's pretty good. When they're running past each other jogging and like the smoke is getting the exhaust getting in your face, right? Just thinking about, in some ways, it feels sort of odd that we power so much of what we do with by burning things, right? That's a sort of odd thing. As we think about this kind of all electric future that we would like to move to, what are the benefits of that? Especially in terms of pollution that you maybe don't see all the time, that's a little more invisible, but still has substantial impacts. So let's talk a little bit about a baseline of the whole energy system and how we get energy and what we do with it in this country. So this is called a Sankey flow diagram. It's a very technical diagram that basically is there are inputs that come in to it, and the amount of these inputs is the width of the lines. There's numbers along here. The useful fact is that the United States uses about 93 quadrillion British thermal units of energy a year. That's a crazy number and a crazy set of units, but notably it's close enough to 100 that you can just think about every number here as a percentage, and you're like pretty close, right? So how do we use sources of energy? We've got a whole bunch of them. We've got some up at the top that are don't emit much pollution, and a bunch at the bottom, fossil fuels that do. A lot of this goes into making electricity for our homes. That includes, cleaner sources like solar, wind, hydro, and it includes burning things to create steam, to turn turbines that also create electricity. When that happens, about a third of it becomes useful energy and about 2/3 is waste. Just because it's actually not very efficient to burn things, to make steam, to turn turbines. Then we use that electricity in a bunch of the rest of what we do, including buildings, residential and commercial. But we also use a lot of direct energy from fossil fuels there too. That includes natural gas, largely for heating and hot water. About 50% of buildings energy comes from directly burning things in the building. Industrial is the way we make things. This is, don't think of it as manufacturing per se, but like how do we make steel or aluminum or fertilizer, paper or plastics? And in each of these cases, sometimes we just need a lot of heat. Sometimes these are raw material inputs to make whatever that is as well. But a lot of it is just, again, burning things to make a lot of heat. The last being transportation. How do we get around? Buses, trains, planes, cars, trucks, motorcycles, any way that you can move. And almost all of this comes from burning petroleum, gasoline, diesel, jet fuel. So this is at a big abstract point, and there's a couple things to point out here about, first off, this rejected energy. This is waste. This is energy that is not providing a useful service at the end of the day, and it's because a lot of converting these things we dug out of the ground and burning them is actually not a very efficient process. There's a lot of waste that's produced in that. And that's something to just think about as we go forward. It actually turns out that directly turning wind or water or sun into electricity is far more efficient. And when we electrify everything, we actually mostly reduce this waste. We won't need 100 quads of energy anymore. We'll only need about 50 because it's so much more efficient. Which means that, yes, we're going to need a lot more energy production of the clean type, but maybe not as much as we think. What actually consumes all that energy, right? Like that's a big abstract map, but let's start putting what's on here. This really great group, Rewiring America, a few years ago, did a survey, and what it turns down to is there are 1 billion machines in our economy that we need to replace. And what is that 1 billion machines? So that's 220 million vehicles of various types, cars, trucks, and such. It's 98 million space heaters. So that's furnaces. It can even be like old school electric heat that should become heat pumps. There's 58 million natural gas furnaces in this country, 117 million hot water heaters, 95 million cooking machines, 35 million of those are gas stoves, 19 million gas clothes dryers, almost 2 million hot tubs directly heated with fossil fuels, as well as 5 million in-ground pools. There are better ways to do this. It's also a very complex web. And for instance, freight trains, 50% of all freight cars that move in the United States carry coal. If we stop burning coal, we actually need less trains. We need less diesel to power those trains. The same thing is true of freight ships. They run on bunker oil, one of the dirtiest fuels that exists. But 50% of the freight ship cargo move is oil and natural gas. And so when we need less of that, we need less of the other. So you get into these virtuous cycles in the process. What's really amazing and empowering, and the core of what we're going to talk about tonight, is about 40% of the machines by sort of energy that they use are directly under your control. They are in your house. That means that every house that we electrify and make efficient is a huge part of this problem. It's not the whole problem, right? And it can't only be done at the household level, but it is an empowering thing to know that you can do it, and that there are now more incentives than ever to make that a reality. So an electric future is a more affordable and abundant future. Heating and cooling your homes with heat pumps will save you on order $1,000 per year on energy costs if you're on propane or fuel oil today, possibly more. A heat pump hot water heater typically saves you about $300 a year in its energy costs. They are so efficient. Every dollar spent on electricity that goes into an electric vehicle gets you about 4 times as far as the same dollar spent on gasoline in a gas car. And so once you've made these switches, that means more money stays in your pocket every month. The maintenance and energy costs for these things are much less. Now, the big challenge, right, and the reason I assume many folks are here tonight is how do you switch? That switch has a cost associated with it, and what programs exist to make that converting to an all-electric future much more affordable. So quick show of hands for folks in the room. How many folks have heard of the Inflation Reduction Act? Good number, great. Does anyone want to say what they think the Inflation Reduction Act does? Volunteers?
Incentives.
The incentives?
Tax credits.
Tax credits? Yep. So the Inflation Reduction Act is the biggest clean energy and climate bill ever signed into law anywhere in the world. It will go down in the history books as one of the most transformative pieces of legislation in the 21st century. And you don't have to read all these numbers. I know this is an eye chart. We will come back to this shortly. It provides huge incentives to make clean energy production affordable, wind and solar tax credits, like at the industrial scale, to produce a lot of clean energy, as well as investments in battery production in the US. That means by the end of the decade, the US will be the world leader in manufacturing batteries and driving down their costs. So it completely transforms our energy system. And it also puts a lot of money directly into the hands of homeowners to electrify their home. This money comes in 2 forms, and we'll talk a little bit about both of them tonight. The first of which is there's a set of tax rebates. These are typically 30% tax rebates on a whole bunch of different stuff that you can put in your house. That includes money for energy efficiency, solar panels, battery storage, heat pumps, heat pump hot water heaters, electric vehicles, and electrical upgrades that you might need to do these things in your home. These largely build on top of existing programs that existed before that maybe had been renewed every 1 or 2 years. But these new programs are now fully funded for the next 10 years. So there's a big window of opportunity here. There's also a set of rebate programs that are based on income. So for folks making below certain income thresholds, there will be upfront rebates for many of these items as well, that you can take advantage of. Those programs are actually administered by the state, and the money will probably, the rules will probably be established by the end of this year or early next year, the whole rulemaking process associated with that. In New York, that may look like a utility rebate program, because our utilities are the ways a lot of these home upgrades have been brought to consumers. So in addition to, this is Nicole Kellner is an artist that does a bunch of climate visualization arcs and gives us our big overview here, and we will go dive into each of these in more detail, so you don't have to read it off the painting. But what's also notable, this is everything that comes in from the federal government, but New York has incentives, and the utilities also have incentives now too. So, for instance, here in the Central Hudson utility zone, in addition to the incentives for heat pump hot water heaters, both air source and geothermal, there are additional Central Hudson rebates associated with those on top of that. And these all stack together. So it may be much more affordable than you might have realized otherwise. All right. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the home efficiency, the IRA home tax credits, which are kind of lumped in this thing of home efficiency, but they're not just efficiency. And the important part about this is, complicated. Would have been nice if they made it less so. There's sort of two buckets that exist, and together there's an annual limit for each bucket, and there's an annual limit when you put them together. So the two buckets are efficiency. Efficiency, more broadly, we'll get into it literally in the next slide, but this might be insulation, air sealing, windows, doors, electrical upgrades. That's a 30% tax credit. It's up to $1,200 per year. There's a heat pump tax credit as well, 30%, up to $2,000 per year in the things that qualify as heat pumps. So together, you can get up to $3,200 per year worth of tax credit to do this process. There are some specific rules around each of these components and what they need to make for an efficiency standard, but that's sort of the magic number to think about in this process. So it may mean that there's a multi-year process you might want to take to maximize this. I will clarify, I am not a tax professional, so talk with your own tax professional or contractor when you are doing this thing, but just to give you an idea what's out there. So in that first bucket, home efficiency, what does that mean? This covers insulation, air sealing. Turns out that you lose just as much heat from your home because of improper air sealing in the attic that creates chimney effects within the walls themselves, as you do from just not having enough insulation. New windows and doors, as well as electrical upgrades, and we'll get into exactly what those are in a minute. So it's a 30% tax credit on all these items. This program has existed. Yes.
30% off of what?
Off of your spend to do that thing.
What you spend. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So this program has existed for quite some time, the home efficiency rebates. People may have looked into it in the past, but it used to come with a $500 lifetime cap. You had to keep track of, like, hey, I upgraded some windows and the windows cost $600, and so I got $120 back, right? But I have a $500 lifetime cap, and I have to keep track of that. That is gone. It is now, you can claim up to $1,200 back per year, every year for the next 10 years. So that's great. It makes it a lot more accessible, and it makes it a lot more possible to dive into this. So what does this mean you should do? If you have never had a home energy audit, you should get one. NYSERDA is the New York agency that does a lot of the renewable energy and home efficiency research and funding. As a whole, you go to NYSERDA.gov in New York, and you will get a list of, you go to the home efficiency page, you'll get a list of contractors in the region that have been certified through them. They will come in and they will do a test of your home of, how does it hold air? How does it hold heat? What are the specific improvements you can make in your home, and that'll start to give you a roadmap of what to do next. And NYSERDA funds that program and makes it, for many of those, depending on income level, it's a free service that these contractors will do. They get paid by the state. Electrical upgrades. So in order to support a fully electrified home, with heat pumps, dryer, electric vehicles, you are going to eventually need 200 amps of service to your home. And a lot of homes in this region only have 100 amps or less. That was the case of our place that we bought 20 years ago. So in the Inflation Reduction Act, it understands that a lot of folks are going to need electrical upgrades, upgrades to their electrical service as to make this ability to make all of these new devices go in there. But they might also need electrical upgrades within the home, some new wiring, some new ability to bring 220 volt plugs to different places. And so that is included as another one of these home efficiency incentives. It's under that same bucket. So the electrical panel upgrade and overall service upgrade can be claimed at any time. And then individual electrical upgrades within your home can be claimed, like if you need to have an electrician run a new 220 volt line, if it was needed for one of these other qualified upgrades, like a heat pump, like a heat pump, a water heater, and such. So we went through this electrical upgrade process about 6 years ago, because at the time we were replacing some water pipes that had way too many pinhole leaks in them, and we had exposed a bunch of ceiling. It's like, wait a minute, we could also run 100 amps into our garage, because one day we'll get an electric vehicle, and that would be an extremely useful place to have a lot of power in the house. So that's something to consider too, in terms of how you want your electricity to look like after this. In addition to 200 amps coming to your house, the biggest single electrical load you will have in the future is a car. And so having a lot of power near wherever you park would be a great thing. All right, I'm going to dive into heat pumps next. What's a heat pump? We're going to talk about sort of theory a little bit first, and then like what are we talking about? There's a whole bunch of these things. So I guess I'll just baseline, like how many folks here are familiar with heat pumps and vaguely how they work? All bunch of people. That's great. So what I will say is that in an electrified future, there's two pieces of technology that feel kind of like magic, and it's heat pumps and induction stoves, because they do things that you're like, I'm not really sure I quite understand how that works. In the normal state of the universe, heat moves from hot to cold. A heat pump uses a magical combination of refrigerants, a compressor, and an expansion device to effectively reverse that. So you can get heat from cold and move it somewhere else. This means you can move heat really efficiently to where you want it. This is how your refrigerator works at home. That's why you can have a cold box in the middle of your house. It's also how an air conditioner works, right? There's a cold side, and it's extracting the heat from your house and pushing it outside, and the outside gets warmer in that process. But you can do that in reverse, so that you can actually extract heat from the outside on a day like today, or even when it's much colder, and move it in. And you can do this in a whole bunch of ways. So the first of these heat pumps that qualify for things under the overall kind of heat pump bucket is a heat pump hot water heater. So the average home uses about 50% of its energy on heat and hot water. And the other 50% is all the other things in your home. Usually things that are running electrically, but you have other things there. So 50% is heat and hot water in your home. Domestic hot water, your hot water heater, the hot water for your showers and your dishwasher and your laundry, That's actually typically about 10% of your overall energy budget for the year goes into that. A heat pump hot water heater looks just kind of like a regular old tank water heater. It's going to have a 50 or 80 gallon tank associated with it, except it's got this hat on top. That is the heat pump itself, and it efficiently transfers heat from the surroundings within your house to heat that water. It can create hot water for about a third the energy of other systems. It also dehumidifies the area around it in the process, which is often a nice benefit for these things sitting in your basement.
And there's no pilot light, right?
There's no pilot right? This is all electricity. Because of the energy savings associated with these, so typically you're using, if this was like a fully electric, just to be like straight comparisons on the electric side, if this is fully electric, you would use about $400 worth of electricity a year for like an average home. The heat pump version of it would use like 130. So you're going to save like close to $300 a year on your energy costs for hot water. Because of both the IRA tax credit and then Central Hudson has a straight upfront $1,000 rebate on these things as well. This is getting a heat pump hot water heater installed is of order $2,000 to $2,500 list price. Then you knock the 30% tax credit that you get back at the end of the year, and then $1,000 straight rebate from Central Hudson. And so this is like now a sub 1,000 that's saving you $300 a year. So the payback cycle is quite quick. And the efficiencies on these are so good, and this is one of the reasons why Central Hudson is out like helping people get them in, because this is a great energy saving technique. So that's 10% of your energy in your house, hot water. 40% of your energy in your house is heat. How do you keep your house warm in the winter? So there's two ways to do this, two kinds of heat pumps. These are air source heat pumps. So either something which is connected into a central ducting system, or these mini splits, which you may now that you know what this is, you may see them all over the place. Heat pumps have been in use in the South since the 1970s energy crisis, as they are highly efficient. But those heat pumps didn't work below about 40 degrees. And people have it in their head that heat pumps stop working at 40 degrees because that's what they may have experienced in North Carolina. Turns out, since the 70s, things have changed. Like phones have changed. So in the last 2 decades, enormous advances have happened in this technology, so that we've got cold climate heat pumps right now that work efficiently up to or efficiently when it's as cold as minus 15 degrees outside. And they keep trying to push this boundary. There's a new one that was announced just a couple weeks ago that's like minus 22 degrees is now their target for. Of all the states in the United States, the one installing heat pumps at the fastest rate is Maine. They work in the cold. So if you currently heat with propane or fuel oil, switching to a heat pump will immediately drop your energy bills. And given the current high costs of natural gas, you'll likely save there as well. Although those costs before the war in Ukraine, the cost of heating with heat pumps versus natural gas were about the same. But natural gas prices have jumped quite a bit since then. There are 2 layers of incentives for switching to heat pumps. So there's the federal IRA incentives. And then there's state incentives in New York that go through Central Hudson in our region. So the IRA has this 30% tax credit again. So it's, you spend X amount and you get 30% of that back at the end of the year when you file your taxes. That's capped at $2,000. Now you're not going to be able to likely convert a home fully for less than of order sort of $20,000 for heat pumps. So that 2,000 helps, but it doesn't, you know, you don't get to take full advantage of 30% in that sense. But in addition, Central Hudson has a set of rebates on top of this. And they're based on how much heating tonnage that you add in the process. They are also based on, so the up to $1,000 per ton is important because you get more credit if you've actually fully removed a fossil fuel heating system in the process. So that is the maximum that you would get if like you are now an all electric heating setup. If it was just being used as supplemental, you left the fossil fuel in, you get less credit from Central Hudson. So that, yep.
Per ton of what?
Per ton of heating. So units are crazy in this world. We typically measure energy for heat in British thermal units and in thousands of them, which is a ton. And pretty typically, if you have a heating HVAC person out to your house, a standard, let's say 2,000, 2,500 square foot home will be like 4 to 5 tons of heating is required depending on how well sealed the envelope is. Yep. Like our home, when we put in a ground source heat pump, we needed a 4-ton system to handle our 2,300 square foot home. So converting your home to heat pumps is the most complicated part of an electrification process. And it will have the longest term impact. So definitely for this, go engage with good local HVAC contractor to do that. They will help understand exactly what it is that you need for your home to make sure that it's affordable and comfortable for you in the winter. So a heat pump moves heat. You can take it out of the air, which is what I just showed you, either by these units that connect into an existing duct system or the mini split units that don't need that. You can also take it out of the ground. And one of the great things about the ground is that once you get about 10 feet down in New York, it's basically a constant 50 degrees there. And there's just a massive amount of like thermal mass down there. It's renewable heat. So that's what we did 5 years ago, 6 winters, when we pulled out our fuel oil system entirely. So we used a company called Dandelion, which does vertical well drills for their ground loops. So they came and they drilled a 500-foot well in their front yard, ran a closed pipe down there. It circulates fluid through that, extracts heat from the ground, heat the home in the winter, and in the summer can dump heat back into the ground and provide a bunch of cooling in the process. This has been a really great, like, no regret solution for us. It's much quieter. It's no more oil bills. When we first did this conversion, this was 6 years ago. We were on a good bulk purchase fuel oil setup with Bard College. And I think fuel oil cost us like 100 or a $1.90 a gallon. And even with that, we were saving of order $1,000 a year immediately. And now like fuel oil is like $5 a gallon. Yeah.
What was your all-in on that conversion?
That all in on that was $20,000. That was 6 years ago. So there's some lift associated with that as well. Yeah. And again, like for a big conversion like that, it's engaged with, there's a number of folks in the region that are doing these and get multiple quotes. But with this, the important thing to remember is that when you see the first number, if you talk to a ground source heat company, it will be a big number. And then what happens is New York State gives them a 25% off the top incentive. And that takes that number down. And then you're gonna get a 30% tax credit on that spend without a limit. This is not in the cap limits. These tax credits for geothermal heating fall in the same category of solar. And so there's no like per year cap on it. So you get that. Central Hudson then throws on $2,000 per ton of heating. They actually subsidize this more than the air source because this uses less energy during peak times. And so it's part of their overall efficiency because it's just more efficient to, the ground's always 50 degrees. So when you need peak heating in a cold snap, the ground's still 50 degrees. The air is probably 0 degrees. And it's just a more efficient process to pull the heat from the ground. So as such, also, if you can go this route, it's the electricity costs are a little bit less than they would be for air source again, because like on the hottest days, you're still using the ground. On the coldest days, you're still using the ground. Your peaks are not quite so peaky. There are some caveats. Most of the ground source heat pumps really expect an existing duct system in your house. They work best when they're going from, it's called water to air. So they have a water loop, but like they want to heat air and they want to distribute that in the system. And that's the way they work most efficiently. So if you have existing ducts, this is worth looking into. If you don't, it may just not work for your home. And, you know, like, again, the reason that Central Hudson and New York put a lot of money behind this as well is in the process of converting our grid. One of the big concerns is what are the peak loads in the winter? Because we're going to see today, the highest energy usage in New York is in the summer. As we electrify, that's going to be in the winter. In what ways can they drop that peak a little bit more? And these are, because they're so efficient, they help with that. And so there's incentive for the state to ensure that they get as many homes converted this way as possible. Okay. So again, the big things that we burn in our house are to heat the home and the hot water. But some folks, you know, have other things in our house that burn fossil fuels. So there are two very specific ones that you might have, which are stoves and clothes dryers. So the Inflation Reduction Act provides money for these as well, but it does it differently, and it does it in a more targeted way. So it's got a rebate program, and it's income-based. And this is one of these programs that the rules are being written right now. The money will be released later in the year. So this may be available end of this year or early next year at the latest. And then it will be good for the next 10 years after that. So what does this look like? If you, to qualify for this, there's a couple of conditions. First, you have to be pulling a fossil fuel powered appliance and replacing it with an electric one. So if you have a gas dryer and you're replacing it with a heat pump dryer, that counts. If you already have an electric dryer, this is no funds for you. Second, it's an income threshold. So it's based on local median income, which is calculated at like a census tract level. So if you make less than 150% of local median income, you will get a 50% upfront rebate for making one of these purchases, up to a total of $840 per appliance. If you make less than 80% of median local income, it's actually 100% upfront. The first $840 is covered. And then you're going to pay the delta. So for like induction or electric stoves, there's a set of models now that are like creeping in at the sort of like $1,100–1,200 range, which means that you could for the stove itself, this would cover most of the stove. There may need to be electrical work that's done to make it work, but this is really intended, and there is a whole set of other rebates that exist as well. in this category to ensure that lower middle income households can see the benefits of this program.
And that's if you're replacing an electric stove.
Not if you're replacing electric.
Now, even if it's an electric stove, then it doesn't.
Yes, it only counts if the net of what you're doing is you're pulling a fossil fuel piece of equipment out of your home and replacing electric.
It has to be
Yeah,
a-
yep. Because again, right, like the goal of this program is not just to get us all to upgrade to new appliances. That'd be cool. But that's the goal of the program is how do we help get fossil fuels out of people's homes that provides them cleaner indoor air, a safer environment, and make sure that people are not left behind in the process. Applies to gas stoves. Yep, yeah, if you remove a gas stove, replace it with electric, then you're good. Yep.
The income bracket, you said local, is that like county?
I believe, so median local income. I forget exactly how big the boundaries are. It is, I believe it's smaller than county. And those, part of the reason these rules are not fully out there right now is because of the complexities of how that was written in the law, and it has to be, the mechanics of it is all 50 states have to apply to the federal government of like, this is how we are going to implement this, and that has to get approved by Treasury. And the intent is that all those programs get approved by the end of the year. And again, I suspect in New York this will go through the utility, and so the utility like Central Hudson will have a new set of rebates, and you will call them up and they'll be like, this is what your income thresholds can be to qualify for this rebate. All right. So I want to just take a sidebar about the second magical electric technology, which is induction stoves, and talk about like how cool that is. So this is cooking with magnets. We replaced our gas, or we did not have a gas stove. We had an old electric stove. It broke about 2 years ago. It had come with the house, so it saw its long life. And if you have the opportunity, you should absolutely replace your gas stove with an electric. And if you're kind of afraid of the cooking experience, I will tell you about our induction experience with it. So an induction stove is not kind of your electric stove of old times. The elements on top of here are pulsed electromagnets. They don't heat up. Instead, these magnetic pulses directly vibrate the iron molecules in your pans. These molecules release, then the pan itself, having been energized, releases that as heat. The cooktop surface doesn't get hot, only the pan itself, and then it will like absorb a little bit of heat from the pan, but it's not like we make something really hot and put a pan next to it. We actually make the pan hot directly. So these induction elements have a huge set of advantages over other cooking technologies. They're extremely efficient. They're very responsive. The thing that folks with gas stoves often get concerned about is, but I don't have enough control. And like on an old electric stove, that's true. The element stays warm for a really long time. But on an induction stove, because of the way it's energizing the pan, you turn it down, it immediately goes down. It's really quick, again, in going up and down and tuning exactly how hot the pan is, but also really powerful. You can get a lot more energy out of these systems because, again, nothing's going to waste. It's all going into the pan. So you can heat a skillet much hotter than you could over a gas flame. And the cleanliness is really important, both for surface cleaning afterwards. There's no gunked on stuff. This is like warm water on a sponge cleans your stove in about 30 seconds. Also, as we've learned more and more about indoor air quality associated with burning things in your home, a gas stove is sort of like living with a smoker in your house. whenever you burn something, there's incomplete combustion, that pollution gets into your home. You can mitigate it with air vents, but you can't get rid of it completely. So this is a dramatically, this will be one of the biggest improvements to indoor air quality in your home, is getting into cooking with electric.
Quick question about that.
Yeah.
Can you use that with all cookware, or do you have to swap out your cookware?
Yes, yes. So if a magnet sticks to the bottom of the pan, it will work. So cast iron will work, like 18-8 stainless and such. Aluminum will not. So depending on what you got, when we went through this process, we had like 3 pans. Well, we had 1 pan we had to replace. Our old chili pot was like a spun aluminum or something. But then we had a couple other that my wife was like, I want to get this too. I'm like, that's fine. We had, the cast iron all works. We had a bunch of 18-8 stainless that all is great.
And then is that a glass top?
Yeah, it's a ceramic. Yeah, but it looks like glass. After 2 years, I found the first scratch in it. Which I only noticed about 2 weeks ago. But like, it's basically like it's very similar glass to what's like in these cell phones at this point. Like it's highly hardened and like, yeah, it's not going to crack on you. All right, solar and storage. The solar tax credits these have existed for a long time, but they were starting to phase out. They're actually phasing down when the IRA passed. They're extended for 10 years at this previous 30% tax rate. In addition, there's a home energy storage battery credits for your home that also qualifies for the 30% tax credit all on its own. It used to be there was a way you could kind of bundle it in with solar panels. But now like you could just get batteries if you wanted. If you have a sun exposed roof, you should definitely look into putting solar panels on this. You should do this after you've done home efficiency upgrades and heat pumps, because that will change your electrical capacity and you'll have a much better sense of what you need in your home for that. So what's interesting about the storage tax credit is that this is going to bring us kind of surprise storage in places you least expected it. Because it can be its own standalone thing. It doesn't have to be with solar panels. So there's a couple of companies right now putting products into the field that will be available by the end of the year that are building electric induction stoves that have a battery in them. And what that means is they don't need an electrical upgrade in your home. You could plug them into a 110 amp wall socket because you're cooking off the battery and you're trickle charging the battery when you're not cooking. It also means the stove works when the power goes out. And because the battery is big enough, it qualifies for the home energy storage tax credit. And so you have 30% off this appliance. So it's an interesting places where you may not expect how things are going to change going forward. All right, electric vehicles. These at this point are, cars and trucks that are just better versions of the cars and trucks we have today. They're quieter, they accelerate faster, they drive smoother, they cost less to drive and maintain. Every car manufacturer that exists has committed to making electric models. Many have given dates about when they are shutting down creating gas cars. That may be in the 2030s, it may be in the 2040s. But they've all said, like, we are out of this other market. So it's great time to start looking into the possibilities here. In New York State, you will also not be able to buy a new gas car after 2035. So there's like 13 more years, 12 more years if they can still be for sale. Once you've driven an electric vehicle for a week, you'll never want to come back. We've got our Chevy Bolt. We've had it for 5 years. It's out in the parking lot if anyone wants to see it later. And we love it. There's new rules on the EV tax credit, and they are extremely confusing because it depends on where the car has seen its final assembly, what percentage of the battery and critical minerals have been produced in US or a free trade country. And the net of it means that over the next few years, as the supply chains all get retooled, it is going to be confusing about what's available when. Treasury Department for the US government has a qualified list of here's all the ones that do qualify today. And they include models from GM, Ford, Tesla, and Volkswagen just got their ID4 qualified as well. But that list is going to be ever evolving over the next couple years. There is newly available a used electric vehicle tax credit. It used to be that the EV tax credits were only for new cars. Now there is a used of up to $4,000. This has income restrictions in it as well. This is intended mostly to ensure that low and middle income households have access to electric vehicles and the second sale market. The Chevy Bolt is actually, in my mind, the poster child for this. The cars have been out there for the last 6 years. You can find these things used for $20,000, $18,000, and then like you could get another 4 back off of that. This has to come through a qualified dealer, but it's a nice additional way to ensure that the transition is affordable for more folks. Okay, do a couple of quick big questions and then a little bit on the future, and then I will round us out just a little bit after 8. So questions I often get, right? So big questions, right? If we electrify everything, is our electrical system capable of handling this? The answer is yes. In addition to the incentives that we've talked about for your home, there's a ton happening on the grid side. Incentives for solar, wind, production, batteries at the utility scale, as well as transmission incentives to make this energy flow between areas of the country. So over the next 20 years, we are going to become the world leader in battery technology and battery supply over the next 10 years. And there's going to be about 1 million clean energy jobs produced in this process. Yes, the grid does need to grow to make this happen, but not as much as we think, because these things are more efficient, and it will be able to handle that. If we make our whole system dependent on electricity, what happens if the power goes out? That is a great question. And it's important to think about what the transition looks like. So first off, we absolutely have to make our electrical system more robust. That includes things like strategically burying power lines. We don't put gas pipes up in trees for a reason. And that's not always the right place to stick our power lines either. Secondly, this storage option for homes, solar plus storage, is a resilience option. Every house with solar plus storage keeps the lights on when the power goes out, which is great. Passive safety. One of the reasons there's incentives for all of this insulation and air sealing is you can make a home much more passively safe, where it loses heat much slower when you aren't actively heating that space. That's also great for the summer because it will gain heat much slower when we get these intense heat waves. And so the house by itself will be safer when we don't have a power, when there happens to be a power interruption. And the last thing, one of my favorites, is actually electric vehicles. These are giant batteries on wheels. And today there is one model, the Ford F-150 Lightning, which can backfeed that power to your house. It's a feature sold with the car. However, over the next probably 3 years, a huge amount of the new models that have been announced have bidirectional charging as one of their features. And so your car will be able to power your home. A sort of standard size car could power a home for about a day. There's a lot of power in that. So that is another way in which this, transition future will be more robust. And this question I get a lot, right? So in this all electric future, we have to mine a lot of stuff to make this. Isn't that really polluting? We do have to get a lot of stuff. This is all the things we got out of all the metals we mined in 2021. And every one of these little blocks is 1 million tons of metal. The metal we mine the most of is iron. Lithium is over here somewhere. Can't quite see it from over here. Lithium is right here. And that'll need to get a little bit bigger, but yeah. The important thing to compare is in 2021, we also extracted 4 billion tons of crude oil, which we burned and put into the atmosphere, and 8 billion tons of coal, which we burned and put into the atmosphere. We still have to mine and extract things to get to a clean energy future, but those things, once we pull those metals out of the ground, they are highly recyclable. And after about 30 years, we're going to have enough sort of circulating in the economy that we won't have to do much more with them, because we don't burn them, we use them. All right, so the future that we make. I firmly believe this clean energy future is inevitable, that we're going to get there one way or another, because it's cheaper, healthier, more resilient. But there's a big difference in well-being depending on how fast we make that transition. We are here. This graph represents the past 100 years of temperature variations and where we might go in the future. And that top line is the trajectory we were on 6 years ago before the Paris Climate Agreement. And we changed the future. We are now on the second to top line. This actually needs to be adjusted again, because last summer with the Inflation Reduction Act, we changed the future again, and we are below that now. If every country did everything they said they were going to do, we would be on the second to bottom line. And where we really would love to be, all the way down here, where it gets warmer for the next 30 years, 40 years, and then we start coming back down, and my great grandkids would have grow up in a world that looked a little bit like what I grew up in. My daughter and her kids down the road they'll be living on a different planet, but like, we can pull that back down. The important thing is these changes were made over just the last 10 years. We can change this with policy. We can make this happen. And these changes in policy that did things like provide all these electrification incentives are a part of that. We got to do a bunch more on that. And a lot of that is about building lots of stuff, right? We've got the money to do this now, to build lots of solar, wind transmission. We also need to be able to actually site it and build it, which means making sure that we've got a way to provide a timely feedback cycle with communities to find the right places to be able to build solar, wind, and transmission. So I'll just round out a little bit with my story, and then we'll take some questions. About 6 years ago, I realized I needed to do more than just cleaning up my own home, although I really enjoyed that project, and it's been really nice to have that. So I joined a volunteer group called Citizens Climate Lobby. We're a collection of tens of thousands of active volunteers across the country in every congressional district, working together to pass meaningful climate policy. We do that by directly engaging our congressional offices and demonstrating to them how much political will there is in the district for these kinds of clean energy programs and transition. This was me in 2019, the first time I went to Capitol Hill lobbying for the climate, meeting with Sean Patrick Maloney's staff in his office there. And one thing I've learned is that while government may not move at the speed that you'd like, and it don't always get what you ask for, you never get the things that you don't ask for. And members of Congress they're people just like us. They have human flaws just like us, and they listen to the folks that talk to them just like us. And so if we are not one of those voices in the room, They're gonna listen to the other people that come in and tell them other things. So professional paid lobbyists do that all the time, but as a constituent, your member should take your phone calls and your emails and sit down and meet with you, and that's something you can do. And it's a really empowering process to be a part of that. The biggest issue is people don't reach out. So we, as volunteers, do that, but we also help other people learn how to do that. And would love to have you as part of that effort if you're interested. So this is where I'm going to end. This is my daughter, Arwen. She is 8. This is the Wappingers Creek Greenway Trail over in LaGrange where I live. That's the bridge that used to go across the creek. It is no more because of Hurricane Ida 2 summers ago, which is this super warmth fueled storm that went through the Gulf. Huge hit in Louisiana, spent 3 days over land and still had enough strength left in it to dump 5 inches of rain overnight, and every part of what you're looking at was underwater. One day we'll get a bridge rebuilt. As a parent, I think a lot about what my daughter's life will be like, both while I'm with her and after I'm gone, and being a part of making this clean energy transition happen, both at an individual level, at our household level, but also affecting policy is something that can provide the best possible future for her and for us and for everyone else. So with that, thanks for inviting me. I'm sure there's some more questions. This is my email address. If you're interested in learning more about our organization and hearing some more from me, I will sending an email. This link, cclusa.join, will get you on our list, which this QR code will do as well. And thank you all for having me here tonight.